This is the pig.
The late singer-songwriter and visual artist Daniel Johnston will soon be inducted into the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame.
Try to remember, but my feelings can't know for sure. Try to reach out, but it's gone. Lucky stars in your eyes.
This song, Walking the Cow, is one of my favorites.
I am walking the cow.
So at this point, you may be thinking, seriously? This guy? In the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame?
His voice sounds sort of like he's been sucking helium.
Erwin Shusad is a music historian and journalist. He's been a freeform DJ at WFMU in New Jersey for more than 50 years and has featured Daniel's music on his shows.
I remember the first time I heard Daniel. I don't remember what song it was. I just remember thinking, wow, this guy's, he's good. It's weird. I heard something that, to me, was a very idiosyncratic songwriting genius. This is someone who clearly feels compelled to make music. It's coming out in a very strange, eccentric manner, but this is sincere.
Family members say as a kid, all Daniel wanted to do was draw cartoon figures and record his songs. He dropped out of college twice. He struggled to keep a job. And when he was employed, he would spend his paycheck on comic books. His drawings show off black and white and brightly colored creations of imagined beings and superheroes. His songs focus on unrequited love, loneliness, good and evil, and his struggles with mental illness. In his 20s, Daniel Johnston was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1 with psychotic features. The arc of his career was interspersed with often lengthy stays in psychiatric units. Daniel was hospitalized off and on for a total of 5 years. Along the way, his fame in the alternative music scene grew. And some songwriters championed his work.
I think most people who put on Daniel's cassette and listened to it in the 80s just thought, is this a joke?
I really don't know what I have to fear.
And then when they really listened to it, they'd be like, oh man, we really need to cover this song.
Coming up, the artistic genius and troubled life of Daniel Johnston. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the show that tells the stories about the things that divide us and sometimes bring us back together. I'm Trey Kay.
Okay, what do you want to do first?
Well, first of all, where are we?
You're in Chester. This is the main street. It's got 6 streets. This is 4th Street. Then you got 5th Street and then 6th Street. And that's the end of town.
Shelley Reed is driving me around Chester, West Virginia. Her cousin, Daniel Johnston, grew up just outside of town. This is about as far north as you can get in the state's northern panhandle.
Top of the West Virginia, yep. What made Chester famous, the teapot and Daniel Johnston.
The world's largest teapot has been a tourist attraction in Chester since 1938. We're headed there now. But many landmarks of Daniel Johnston's presence in Chester are gone, including his childhood home and murals he painted at the high school.
But people in town, I don't know, they even erased his stuff. He drew a picture of a bear and stuff out at high school. I'm sure they wish they had it now because he just became so famous, but they colored over it, painted over it. Have you seen his yearbook? He drew a lot of pictures in the yearbook. I mean, he just was always drawing pictures, always. After he died, my daughter and I stayed down there at their house for 2 weeks because they were so overwhelmed selling all the stuff that people wanted after he passed away that I just was in shock. I said, I cannot believe people are paying this for like 800, anywhere from 100 to 800. It's just kind of crazy that I'm related.
Say more. Why is it that you think that sounds crazy?
Oh, you know, from Chester, West Virginia. It's a little kid that liked playing the piano, and here he is writing down every thought that came to his head and drawing every picture that comes to his mind, and here he is, famous.
Shelley parks next to the world's largest teapot.
We're here! Do you want to get out and look at it? Of course you do. Silly question.
Daniel Johnston was born in Sacramento, California in 1961, the youngest of Mabel and Bill Johnston's 5 children. A few years later, the family moved to Bill's home state of West Virginia. Daniel's oldest brother, Dick, says they were brought up in a Christian home. How did your parents react to Daniel's songs?
You know, I think they had mixed feelings about it. The earliest disputes that arose about what he was doing had more to do with his art than his music, maybe. He was drawing these dead dogs' eyeballs. You could find these things all over the county for the longest time because he and his friends were putting them everywhere, and Mother thought that was distasteful. I never heard them comment on the songs except to say that they are very good and that they thought that they were a little on the depressing side.
So can you tell me about the first time Daniel played a song for you, one that he composed?
Yeah, it was 1981. He sat me down at the piano, played through a series of songs, gave me a tape. I was really deeply impressed, but I was thinking at the same time, no one is ever going to listen to this because it was just too raw and amateurish.
If I had my own way, you'd be with me here today. But I rarely have my own way. I guess that's why you're not here with me today. And the librarian said, you can't buy no respect. I said, hey lady, what can you expect when I'm lying on the floor?
The song was Grievances, and it was on Daniel's first self-produced cassette album, Songs of Pain. He recorded it himself and gave away copies to anyone who'd take one.
Grievance is the song that, to him, describes his angst and struggles all the way around, and it's a great song. This is with the age of the Carpenters or Queen, and Daniel wanted to be like that. Even in his most raw efforts, he wants to sound like the Beatles.
Goodbye, lonely heart drawings, they never did work anyhow. I'm looking for a nice girl and I don't want no cow. I'm heading out west, gonna find me the best. Well, I played the game, but I failed the test. If I can't be a lover, then I'll be a pest. Yes, I will.
That pest part of Daniel's personality got under his mom's skin. Here's Mabel Johnston in the 2005 documentary, The Devil and Daniel Johnston, directed by Jeff Feuerzig.
Dan was getting to be a problem, and he wanted to do everything, but he didn't want to do any of his chores, like help mow the lawn or wash the car or any of those things. And I thought he was lacking in training. I had to settle that.
Dick Johnston says it's around this time that a friend of Daniel's said he wouldn't hang out anymore because Daniel acted weird.
Mom saw that he was deeply depressed and took him to specialists. But there's, in those days, they would probably discount it as, yeah, he's in a junior high and things like that. They wouldn't see it as a long-term problem.
Did you see your brother as different?
I did ask that a lot. And my answer is that I didn't have another brother to compare him to. So Yeah, maybe there were some quirky things about him, but I didn't know that this wasn't the experience of all siblings, with each other. Later in high school, I think it became more apparent that he was going to have a hard time in the real world.
Daniel graduated from Oak Glen High School in 1979. He tried 2 different colleges, but dropped out both times. He fell hard for a girl who liked him, but didn't love him. He poured his heartbreak into his songs.
Pull my love out the door. I rode out to your house and brought you a Valentine. And what did you do? Pull my love out the door.
Daniel recorded this and many other songs on a $59 Sanyo boombox in the basement of his parents' home in West Virginia. The early 1980s was an incredibly creative time for him. But Daniel was failing to launch.
Dad was so frustrated with his failed attempts at employment and with his dropping out of school, he wasn't really accomplishing anything. He said Danny wanted to just work on his music and art and nothing else.
In 1983, Dick invited Daniel to spend the summer at his home near Houston. Dick thought Daniel could get a job at Astroworld.
I thought he needed some help, and I thought, well, maybe this will be a chance to do that, to come to Texas and work at an amusement park and start getting somewhere. He didn't want to accept my offer, but he felt compelled to, so he did.
A few months later, Daniel moved in with his sister who lived near Austin. And then 22-year-old Daniel Johnston disappeared. He had joined a traveling carnival.
He thought that we were on the verge of committing him with a mental illness. And he was paranoid about it, but there was nothing like that going on. None of us had ever discussed such a thing.
Put on my worry too. My worry too.
After 5 months on the road, the carnival stopped in Austin. The liberal city, home to the University of Texas, became the proving ground for Daniel Johnston's fervid creativity. Singer-songwriter and recording artist Kathy McCarty says at that time you could rent an entire house for $300 a month. The combination of young people in an affordable college town ignited a local music scene.
It was like an arts explosion. I mean, there was so much going on. There were a lot of really, really good bands. And you could go out almost any night of the week and go to a venue, there'd be 1,000 people there.
McCarty's band, Glass Eye, was popular. She says a lot of musicians wanted to open for them and would give her cassettes, including Austin newcomer Daniel Johnston.
This weird guy came over to me and gave me his cassette tape, and he clearly was like dying of nervous energy, like couldn't even bring himself to like barely talk to me. And I took his cassette and I said, yeah, I'll listen to it. And it was Hi, How Are You was the tape. I listened to about 2 songs and I went, oh my God, this guy's a genius. And we didn't even practice that day. All we did was listen to his tape over and over.
McCarty says Daniel did not play piano or chord organ for his Austin debut with Glass Eye. He decided to play the guitar.
He was a pretty good piano player. He always was. And he was, in my opinion, a really bad guitar player. And he was in a town of guitar players. So that was not necessarily the greatest move on his part, but that was what he decided to do. He said, I'm going to play guitar now.
I am a baby in my universe. I'll live forever. Ooh, I'm only 22. I'll live forever.
So he had I think we'd scheduled something like half an hour for him to play songs, like 6, 7 songs. And he rushed through 3 songs and then ran off stage. And he climbed out the bathroom window and ran away.
Wow. Now, you talk about him being nervous. You also described him as weird the first time that he, came up to you. Were you aware at that point that he had some type of mental illness or mental disability?
When I met him, like the time that he seemed so incredibly nervous and weird, I did not think he had a mental disability. I thought he was just really, really overestimating my fame. So I thought he was just full of adrenaline, essentially. And then we went to his house to visit him shortly after we listened to his tape. And when we went over there, he told us that he was a manic depressive. But I don't think we took it very seriously because a lot of people who are artists are weirdos, right? And I just thought he was really eccentric and brilliant, but not necessarily like mentally ill. And that's what I continued to think until I saw him actually be mentally ill and see essentially be hallucinating and not being so manic that he didn't sleep for weeks on end. And then you'd be like, he really is a manic depressive.
Kathy McCarty says Daniel was breaking artistic barriers.
I think most people who put on Daniel's cassette and listened to it in the 80s just thought, is this a joke? And pretty much the only people who didn't listen to it that way were other songwriters. Because our band was the first band to champion him here in Austin, and probably the world. And it didn't take a long time for other Austin bands to also get on the Daniel train, because every band has a songwriter or two. And when they really listen to it, they'd be like, oh man, we really need to cover this song.
Daniel Johnston's music has been described as simplistic, troubled, childlike, and achingly sincere. He has also been called an outsider artist, a term coined by music historian and journalist Erwin Chusett.
Nobody aspires to be an outsider artist. If they are, they're probably a poser. This is their artistic expression. It is sincere. It is real. It is just the way influences come in and are filtered through their consciousness. And what comes out the other end is something very strange, sometimes unfathomable.
Chusett first got turned on to this lo-fi music when a friend played the 1969 album Philosophy of the World by a three-sister group called the Shags.
Oh, the rich people want what the poor people's got, and the poor people want what the rich people's got.
Everything just sounds wrong. It's completely uncoordinated. There's almost something otherworldly about it, and yet there was something holding it together. There was something pure about it. While at the same time, there was something comical about it, because it was clear what they were attempting, but it was also clear that they were not succeeding. But what they created was something original. It had an identity. Every song sounded similar in that regard. It had the same qualities.
Chusett's appreciation of outsider music led to his book, Songs in the Key of Z, The Curious Universe of Outsider Music. He included Daniel Johnston, who he believes is in a league of his own.
He has pop appeal. He has a huge body of work. He has songs that people can cover. They can sing them. Anybody can listen to Daniel's songs and hear a hook, hear a melody, hear a verse and a chorus, hear something unusual in the lyrics. They can hear Daniel's soul in that music. And that's something that also applies to every, can I use this word, great outsider musician. They are expressing their soul.
Daniel became a well-known part of Austin's alternative music scene. An indie label was issuing his cassettes, but his fame took off after he appeared on the popular music video cable channel MTV.
This is Daniel Johnston, local man about town, musician. Everyone knows who he is, but say hi to everyone.
My name is Daniel Johnston. This is the name of my tape, and it's Hi, How Are You? And I was having a nervous breakdown when I recorded it.
Coming up, more on Daniel Johnston's artistic legacy. You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by a grant from the CRC Foundation.
To the Moreland Hills, Wild West Virginia, Rolling Hills, Wild West Virginia, Rolling Hills.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
Hey, it's Trey, and you're listening to Us and Them from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Daniel Johnston's childlike voice, lo-fi style, anxiety-riddled lyrics, and home-produced cassettes earned him a cult following in Austin, Texas. His national profile rose when he appeared on MTV in the summer of 1985. It was a dream come true.
Dave, here I am on MTV holding up my tape. Hi, how are you? And they're recording me tonight. I'm on MTV. Remember when we used to watch MTV back home? Look, I'm on MTV, David.
Daniel played I Live My Broken Dreams. The song is about the time he ditched his sister's place and joined the circus.
When I was out in San Marcos a year ago today, they probably would have put me in a home. But I threw all my belongings into a garbage bag and out into the wilderness I did roam. My hopes lay shattered like a mirror on the floor. I see myself and I look really scattered, but I live my broken dream.
Dick Johnston says MTV was the way he found out about Daniel's success in Austin.
We were told that he was going to be on MTV, and us kids assembled here at my sister's house in Houston and watched it together. I Live My Broken Dream.
Yeah.
And it's heart-wrenching. Especially it was to us because I heard it as him explaining to us what was going on in his life. Here I am living my broken dream. It's so simple and self-revealing and raw, as so many of his songs are, that it gets to you. And that the audience loved it, and it's still one of his more favored songs.
I live my broken dream.
He's a guy who's obsessed with MTV, and he's on MTV. Why is that a broken dream?
Because it's a shallow presentation of the reality of things, I think. He was conflicted about this accomplishment. He drew pictures of Satan sitting at the control board where they're controlling people and saying, "Oh, I've got him this time," and Daniel's at a studio on MTV. That somehow he was falling in a trap that the world often brings people to, and he was aware of it, but also wanting it.
A few months after his MTV appearance, Kathy McCarty says Daniel experienced a psychotic episode.
By the fall of 1985, he was starting to have a nervous breakdown because it was really too much too fast for him. He thought Satan was coming to Austin, and he was in the middle of a creek all wet and really, really cold temperatures, and this guy named Randy Kemperer, who had become his manager, was trying to get him out of the creek, and Daniel hit him over the head with a lead pipe and really hurt him. And that's when he was committed to the mental institution here in town, and he was there for quite a while. But his mental health never really recovered from that 1985 breakdown.
That December, Daniel released his 9th cassette album. He wouldn't release another for 3 years.
He reached a point of being so depressed that his manager called my dad and said, I don't know what he's doing, but he's throwing everything into the trash bin. I think you need to come down and get him. And Dad did. He flew down and picked him up.
Bill Johnston, a World War II pilot, took Daniel back to the family home in West Virginia. Daniel went to New York to record his first studio album, but his behavior was erratic and aggressive. He was briefly hospitalized after assaulting another musician. He went to Maryland for another recording project. Upon his return to Chester, Daniel got off the bus and wandered around town. He got into an altercation with a 68-year-old woman who jumped out of the window of her second-story apartment when Daniel kicked the door down. She broke both legs. Daniel later told a judge he was protecting her from a demon. The judge sent him to a psychiatric hospital in Weston, West Virginia, where he stayed for several months and was released to the custody of his parents. Daniel had another alarming psychotic break a few years later in 1990, shortly after he was released from Weston. Daniel was scheduled to perform at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin. Bill Johnston flew him there.
What my dad didn't know was that Dan had this idea that if he stopped taking his meds, he would be more creative and be a better hit at the South by Southwest event. So when they began the return flight, he kind of went berserk. He was reading a comic book about Casper the Friendly Ghost, where Casper's jumping out of a plane with a parachute, and he pulls the keys out of the ignition and throws it out the window, takes control of the plane. Dad attempts to get the second pair of keys out of his pant pocket, and he says Dan grabbed his arm, and he has a superhuman strength when he's crazy. Dad could not get his key, and he could not fight Dan at the controls. Dan was too crazy about it. Eventually, when the plane was in a full spiral spin, Dan was so interested in looking out the window that he was able to throw the plane at the last moment into a dive to gain airspeed to get out of the spin, pulled up over the top of some pine trees in Arkansas, and it brought them down to the ground at a speed they could survive, although they were bruised from head to foot. I didn't have any broken bones or anything. The plane was destroyed. From that moment, Dan would spend nearly a year in Arkansas being detained, and Dad went home crushed.
Your picture is still on my wall.
How did the rest of the family react to that?
My sister, Aunt Margie, and I drove up to meet him. We spent the first 30 minutes together just crying. Felt like, where was my brother? This is not my brother.
Bright as ever.
I've learned this is not an uncommon experience for families. If it's not mental illness, it's something else that causes alienation.
Something lasts a long time.
While Daniel was dealing with his mental health, other musicians were drawing attention to his songs. Nirvana's Kurt Cobain attended the MTV Music Awards wearing a t-shirt with Daniel's Frog-Like Alien from the Hi How Are You album. The indie rock band Yo La Tengo covered Daniel's song Speeding Motorcycle. And Austin musician Kathy McCarty released Dead Dog's Eyeball, songs of Daniel Johnston. It had been about 10 years since he first opened for her band. She says she started working on the album while Daniel was hospitalized in Weston.
And that's when I made my album of his covers, because I thought I want people to hear this music in a way that they can relate to.
McCarty achieved her goal of bringing Daniel's work to a wider audience. The album was well received, and this song, Living Life, was included in the soundtrack of the movie Before Sunrise.
This is life, and everything's on
oftentimes people used to ask me in interviews, do you think that his mental illness is like what makes him such a great songwriter? And I'd be like, no, if he had not been mentally ill, it would have been much better. His mental illness, it stood in his way.
Daniel continued to record, often collaborating with other musicians. His 18th and final album was issued in 2012. But his most enduring work was the material from the 1980s, and much of it was from West Virginia. His dad, and later his brother Dick, managed him. They toured with him, booking local artists to accompany him. Daniel eventually stopped playing guitar or piano. He had developed tremors from the medications he took. In 2017, Daniel announced he would retire from performing. He did a final 5-date tour. Each stop featured a different band, influenced by his music. Jeff Tweedy, frontman of Wilco, and his son backed up Daniel at the Old Vic in Chicago. Daniel sat in a chair, reading his lyrics off a music stand, gripping the microphone, visibly shaking.
Listen up and I'll tell a story about an artist growing old. Some would try for fame and glory, others aren't so bold.
Here's Jeff Tweedy.
There's a real liberated sense of expression in the way Daniel would write his songs, the language choices he would make. It all seemed very unself-conscious in a way that felt effortless and sort of infuriating in a way for songwriters. It just seemed just like such a natural thing for him to do. But I always stop at the notion that he created what he created because of his mental illness. I think that's a dangerous idea. I think it's a lazy assessment of what his real talents were. I think he created in spite of his mental illness.
On September 11th, 2019, Daniel Johnston was found dead in his home in Waller, Texas. He was 58 and died of an apparent heart attack. His brother Dick manages Daniel's estate. Dick says the proceeds from sales of Daniel's drawings and other merchandise pay for the upkeep of his voluminous archives and legacy building projects. Jeff Tweedy will induct Daniel Johnston into the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame and perform at the ceremony. He says it's a great honor.
If it was up to me, he'd be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or he'd be in every state's Hall of Fame. I don't know. I just think that, there are a lot of good reasons to keep his music alive and keep a focus on the art that he made.
Daniel Johnston joins the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame, along with conductor and arranger Cameron Lavelle Mullins. Jeff Stevens, who's written or produced more than 40 #1 country hits, and the family R&B group, the Valentinos, also known as the Womack Brothers, one of West Virginia's most important musical dynasties. Daniel's visual art is also in the spotlight. The art publisher Rizzoli will soon release a 400-page book spanning 4 decades of Johnston's work. Daniel is also remembered through the Hi How Are You Foundation, a nonprofit that educates young people worldwide about mental health through community building events. For a kid who started out making cassette tapes in his family's basement, that's quite a legacy.
So, finally, what do you want folks to know who know nothing about your brother? What do you want them to know?
Okay, even if you don't like outsider music, you're missing something in what's available in the human experience today if you're not listening to some of Daniel Johnston. He is a really deep philosophical commentator on the world and society and life and our experience that I think has valuable things to give to people. So it's something that shouldn't be missed.
2, 3, 4. Trying to remember, but my feelings can't know for sure. Try to reach out, but it's gone. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this show was me, Trey Kay, Amy Eddings, and Kate Smith. Special thanks to Matthew Hancock, Courtney S. Lennon, Michael Lipton, Jeff Tartikoff, and Donnie Velez. Michael Lipton, Tristan Lozow, and Ahmed Solomon wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the CRC Foundation. Hey, we'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Can you connect with us on our Facebook page or on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Us Them Podcast? Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them. Lucky stars in your eyes. Lucky stars in your eyes. Yeah, I'll be right up, Mom.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.